What happens when one of hip-hop's most socially conscious voices sits down with late-night television's sharpest political commentator, and the conversation takes a turn nobody saw coming? The clash between Chance the Rapper and Stephen Colbert became one of the most talked-about moments in late-night history, and what started as a standard promotional interview ended with security being called and a guest being escorted off set. Before we get into exactly how this all went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which side you think was right in this situation, because trust me, you're going to have opinions by the end of this. The Late Show was running like clockwork that evening. Chance the Rapper was booked to promote his latest project, and everyone expected the usual friendly banter that Colbert is known for. The audience was packed, the energy was high, and when Chance walked out to thunderous applause, everything seemed perfect. Colbert stood up, shook his hand, and they both settled into their seats, with smiles on their faces. Colbert opened with his typical warmth, congratulating Chance on his recent work and asking about his creative process. Chance responded enthusiastically, talking about how he'd been inspired by conversations happening in his community, how he wanted his music to reflect real struggles and real hope. The audience was eating it up, nodding along, applauding at all the right moments. This was exactly the kind of wholesome content late-night shows thrive on. But then Colbert shifted gears. He leaned forward slightly and said, "So you've been pretty vocal about staying independent in the music industry, about not signing with major labels. That's admirable. But I'm curious, do you think that position comes from a place of privilege? I mean, you had connections, you had resources that a lot of young artists don't have access to." The audience went quiet. Chance's smile faltered for just a second before he caught himself. He nodded slowly and said, "I appreciate the question, Stephen. I really do. But I think you might be missing some context there. When I talk about independence, I'm not saying everybody should do what I did. I'm saying the industry is designed to exploit artists, especially black artists, and we need to have conversations about that." Colbert jumped back in almost immediately. "But isn't that the game though? Isn't that capital? Artists in every field have to make deals, have to compromise. What makes musicians special?" Chance shifted in his seat. "You're really going to sit here and compare what record labels do to young black kids from Chicago to regular business deals? Come on, man, you're smarter than that." The tension in the studio was suddenly palpable. Colbert's face hardened, just a fraction. "I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying it's reality. And I think when you present yourself as this champion of independence, you're not acknowledging the advantages you had that made that possible." Chance let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Advantages? You want to talk about advantages? Let's talk about how you got your start in comedy, Stephen. Let's talk about the doors that opened for you, the networks you had access to, the second chances you got that people who look like me don't get." Colbert's eyebrows shot up. "Now wait a minute, that's not what this conversation is about." "Oh, so we can talk about my so-called privilege, but we can't talk about yours. That's interesting." The audience didn't know whether to gasp or applaud. Some did both. Colbert tried to steer things back. "Look, I think we're getting off track here. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about the music industry." "No," Chance interrupted, "you're trying to make a point, and the point you're making is condescending. You're sitting here implying that my success is just because I had help. Like the work doesn't matter, like the risk I took doesn't matter. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. It's in the way you asked the question." Colbert sat back in his chair, clearly frustrated. "Chance, I've had hundreds of guests on this show, and I ask tough questions because I respect them enough to have real conversations. If you can't handle that, maybe you're not ready for this platform." The studio went completely silent. Chance stared at Colbert for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he said, very slowly, "Did you just tell me I'm not ready for this platform? Your platform?" Colbert seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, but he didn't back down. "I'm saying that if you're going to be a public figure, if you're going to put yourself out there with strong opinions, you have to be able to defend them without getting defensive." Chance stood up. "Getting defensive? Man, you've been attacking me since I sat down. You brought me here to talk about my music, and instead, you want to debate whether I deserve my success. And now you're telling me I need to earn the right to be on your show. This is wild." Colbert raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Sit down. Let's talk about this like adults. We were talking like adults until you started talking to me like I'm a child. I don't need this." The audience was completely frozen. Some people looked uncomfortable, others were leaning forward in their seats, unable to look away. Colbert's producer was frantically gesturing from off stage, but neither man was paying attention to anything except each other. Colbert's voice took on an edge. "You know what, Chance, if you want to walk off, that's your choice. But don't expect to come back here and act like you're some victim. I've given you a platform to share your voice, and this is how you respond to one challenging question." "One challenging question," Chance repeated, his voice rising. "You've been questioning my integrity, my authenticity, my entire career. And you did it with a smile on your face like that makes it okay." "That's what I do," Colbert shot back. "I challenge people. I make them think. If you can't handle being challenged, maybe you should stick to interviews where people just blow smoke about how great you are. The mask was completely off now. This wasn't playful sparring or debate for the sake of entertainment. This was genuine anger on both sides. Chance pointed at Colbert. You know what your problem is? Stephen, you think because you're liberal, because you make fun of Republicans, that means you get a pass. That means you can't be called out when you're doing the same thing they do, just with better words. And what exactly am I doing? Chance, please, enlighten me. You're using your platform to diminish what I've built. You're sitting in your late-night throne, making jokes about the president or whoever, and you think that makes you an ally. But the second a young black artist doesn't play the game exactly how you want, you show your whole hand. Colbert stood up now too, his face flushed. That is completely unfair, and you know it. I have used this show to highlight racial injustice, to call out inequality, to give voices to people who don't normally get heard. Don't you dare question my commitment to those issues. Chance laughed bitterly. See, that's the thing. You think highlighting issues is the same as understanding them. You think talking about problems makes you part of the solution. But when someone like me sits in front of you and doesn't fit into your neat little box of what a conscious rapper should be, you can't handle it. What box? What are you even talking about? The box where I'm supposed to be grateful. Stephen, where I'm supposed to smile and nod and say thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for asking me about my struggles. Thank you for letting me exist in your space. That box, the audience was completely divided now. Some people were clearly uncomfortable, checking their phones, whispering to each other. Others were locked in, watching this unfold like a car crash they couldn't look away from. Colbert's bandleader looked like he wanted to disappear into his keyboard. Colbert took a breath, clearly trying to regain control. Okay, I think we need to take a step back here. This conversation has gotten heated, and maybe we both said things we didn't mean. Let's sit down and try to find some common ground. Common ground. Chance shook his head. Man, there is no common ground when you fundamentally don't respect what I do or who I am. You proved that with your questions. You proved that when you told me I wasn't ready for your platform. I apologized for that. No, you didn't. You said let's talk like adults. That's not an apology, that's another condescension. Colbert's jaw clenched. Fine, I apologize. I shouldn't have said you weren't ready for this platform. That was out of line. Chance studied him for a moment. You know what the sad part is? I actually respected you. I watched your show. I laughed at your jokes. I thought you were one of the good ones. But this right here, this is exactly why people don't trust media anymore. Because even the so-called good guys can't help but tear down someone who doesn't perform the way they want. That is not what I was doing. Then what were you doing, Stephen? Seriously, explain it to me. Explain how questioning whether I deserve my success is productive. Explain how implying that I only made it because of privilege is helpful. Colbert ran a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. I was trying to have a nuanced conversation about systemic advantages in the entertainment industry. I was trying to acknowledge that while your independence is admirable, not everyone has that option, and maybe we should talk about why. And you couldn't just ask me that. You had to frame it like I'm some out-of-touch artist who doesn't understand the real world. That's not how I framed it. That's exactly how you framed it. And when I called you on it, you got defensive. You pulled rank. You reminded me whose show this is. The producer was making increasingly frantic gestures now, but Colbert waved him off. Look, Chance, I think we're both passionate about these issues, and sometimes passion leads to misunderstandings. Don't do that. Don't try to smooth this over like it's just a misunderstanding. You meant what you said, and I meant what I said. The difference is, I'm willing to own it. Colbert's voice rose. I am owning it. I just apologized. What more do you want from me? I want you to understand why this is a problem. I want you to see that just because you're on the right side, politically doesn't mean you can't perpetuate the same harmful dynamics that exist everywhere else in this industry. And I want you to understand that I am trying. I am genuinely trying to use this platform for good, to ask important questions, to challenge people in ways that matter. If I got it wrong tonight, I'm sorry, but I'm human. Chance paused. The fire in his eyes dimmed just slightly, but he didn't sit down. Being human means being willing to learn. Being human means listening when someone tells you you hurt them. But what you're doing right now is defending yourself instead of hearing what I'm saying. What you're saying is that I'm a hypocrite, that I'm no better than the people I criticize on this show every night. How am I supposed to respond to that? By considering whether there's truth in it, by asking yourself if maybe, just maybe, you have blind spots like everybody else. Of course, I have blind spots. Everyone does. But I don't think it's fair to act like this entire conversation was me attacking you when I was simply trying to engage with your ideas. Engage with my ideas or poke holes in them, because those are two different things. Stephen, they can be the same thing. Critical engagement is how we grow, how we develop better arguments, stronger positions. Chance shook his head slowly. You're still not getting it. This isn't about critical engagement. This is about respect. You can challenge someone's ideas without questioning their legitimacy. You can disagree without being dismissive. I was not dismissive. You were. And the fact that you can't see it, that you can't even acknowledge the possibility. That's the whole problem right there. The audience had started to murmur among themselves now. The energy in the room had shifted from shocked silence to uncomfortable tension. People were looking at each other, trying to figure out if this was real or some kind of planned bit. But the anger in both men's voices made it clear this was absolutely real. Colbert looked out at his audience, then back at Chance. Okay, you know what? I think maybe we should just end this interview here. Clearly this isn't productive for either of us. Now you want to end it. After you got me all the way out here, after you questioned everything I stand for, now you want to just wrap it up nice and neat. What do you want me to do? Chance, you want me to sit here and let you call me a hypocrite on my own show? I want you to actually listen. I want you to stop defending and start hearing. But I can see that's not going to happen. Colbert's face was red now. You know what? You're right. Maybe I don't understand. Maybe I can't understand because I haven't lived your experience. But I have spent years trying to be an ally, trying to amplify voices like yours. And this is the thanks I get. The thanks you get? Man, listen to yourself. You sound like you're doing charity work. Like having me on your show is some favor you're granting me. That is not what I meant, but it's what you said. Again, you keep saying things and then telling me that's not what you meant. But at some point, Stephen, you have to own your words. Fine. You want me to own my words? I'll own them. I think you came on this show with a chip on your shoulder. I think you were looking for a fight, and you found one. I asked you a legitimate question about privilege in the music industry, and you turned it into this whole thing about race and power and my supposed hypocrisy. A legitimate question about privilege. You asked me if my independence was only possible because of advantages I had. That's not a question. That's an accusation. It was an observation based on facts. Facts? What facts? Stephen, you don't know my life. You don't know what I've been through, what I've sacrificed, what I've built from nothing. Colbert's voice went quiet, which somehow made it more intense. You're right. I don't know your life, but I do know that some people have opportunities that others don't, and acknowledging that isn't an attack. It's reality. Acknowledging it by questioning whether I earned what I have. That's your version of reality. I never said you didn't earn it. I said you had advantages that made your path possible. Those are two different statements. Chance stepped closer to Colbert's desk. But you said them to me, not to any of your white guests who also had advantages, not to actors whose parents were in the industry, not to musicians who went to expensive schools. You said them to me, the black independent artist from Chicago. Think about that for a second. The implication in Chance's words hung in the air like smoke. Colbert opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. That is completely unfair. I have asked tough questions to every kind of guest. Have you though? Have you really? Or do you save certain questions for certain people? Now you're accusing me of racism. On my own show, after everything I've done to fight against that exact thing, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking you to examine your own actions, your own patterns. But you can't even do that without getting defensive and making yourself the victim. I am not making myself the victim. You're the one who's been attacking me for the last 10 minutes. Because you attacked me first. The difference is, you did it with a smile and a handshake, so you think it doesn't count. Colbert slammed his hand on his desk. Enough. This has gone too far. I invited you here in good faith, and you've turned this into a circus. A circus. This is a circus. Me standing up for myself, that's a circus to you. You're being unreasonable. You're twisting everything I say into something malicious when that was never my intent. Intent doesn't erase impact. Stephen, how many times do people have to tell you that before it sinks in? The audience was completely silent now, every eye glued to the two men facing off. Security personnel had appeared at the edges of the stage, clearly unsure whether to intervene. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this disaster. Colbert looked at his producer, then back at Chance. I think you need to leave. Oh, now I need to leave? After you got what you wanted, after you pushed and pushed until I pushed back, now you want me gone. I want this interview to end. I want to move on with my show, and I want you to leave my stage. Your stage, your show, your platform. You keep saying that like it means something, like ownership gives you the right to treat people however you want. I have treated you with nothing but respect. Chance laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Respect. You call this respect. You questioned my legitimacy. You talked down to me. You pulled rank on me, and now you're kicking me out. If this is respect in your world, I feel sorry for you. Colbert stood up fully now, his voice hard. Security, please escort our guest out. Unbelievable. You're really doing this. You're really going to have me thrown out because I didn't play along with your little game. This isn't a game, Chance. This is my show, my livelihood, and you came here and disrespected it. I disrespected it. I responded to your disrespect with honesty. That's all I did. But you can't handle honesty, can you? You can only handle people who agree with you, who nod along, who don't call you out when you're wrong. Two security guards approached cautiously, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. One of them spoke quietly. Sir, we need you to come with us. Chance looked at the security guards, then back at Colbert. This is really how you want to do this. On camera, in front of everyone, you made that choice, not me. I made the choice to be honest. You made the choice to shut me down. There's a difference. Goodbye, Chance. Chance stared at Colbert for a long moment, then shook his head. You know what the saddest part about this is? You actually believe you're the good guy here. You actually think you did nothing wrong. That's what makes this so pathetic. One of the security guards gently touched Chance's arm. Sir, please. Chance pulled his arm away. Not aggressively, but firmly. I'm going. I don't need to be escorted like some criminal. He turned to the audience, many of whom looked shell-shocked. Y'all saw this? You all witnessed what just happened here. Remember it. He walked toward the exit, the security guards following at a respectful distance. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. A few people clapped hesitantly. Others sat frozen in their seats. Chance didn't look back. Colbert stood at his desk, his face unreadable. The cameras stayed on him as he tried to compose himself. His band leader looked at him questioningly, waiting for a cue. The producer was frantically talking into his headset. Finally, Colbert cleared his throat. Well, that was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have our next guest. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. As the show cut to commercial, Colbert sat down heavily in his chair. The audience remained seated, murmuring to each other, pulling out phones, already texting and posting about what they'd just witnessed. Some people were leaving. Others were staying, hoping to see what would happen next. Backstage, Chance pushed through the doors and out into the hallway, the security guard stopping at the threshold. His team rushed to him, asking if he was okay, what happened, whether they needed to do damage control. But Chance just kept walking, his jaw set, his mind clearly racing. Back in the studio, Colbert was in a heated discussion with his producers. His hands were gesturing wildly, his voice low but intense. The audience could see the tension even from their seats. Whatever was being said, it was clear that nobody involved thought this had gone well. The commercial break ended, and Colbert was back at his desk, his composure somewhat restored. His smile was back in place, though anyone looking closely could see it was strained. He introduced his next guest, made a few jokes, tried to get the show back on track. But the energy in the room had fundamentally shifted. The ease and comfort that usually defined The Late Show was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that something significant had just happened. The next guest did their best, answering questions gamely, promoting their project. But even they seemed thrown off by the atmosphere. Colbert went through the motions professionally, but the spark that usually animated his interviews was missing. He was on autopilot, getting through the rest of the show by sheer force of will and years of experience. When the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Colbert didn't do his usual routine of thanking the audience and waving goodbye. He simply stood up, nodded to the crowd, and walked off stage. The audience filed out in groups, everyone talking at once, phones out, already seeing the clips spreading across social media. Within minutes, the confrontation was everywhere. Clips of the argument were being shared thousands of times per minute. Think pieces were being drafted. Hot takes were flying. Everyone had an opinion about who was right and who was wrong, about what it meant, about what it said about race and media and privilege and power. Some people defended Colbert, saying he was just doing his job, asking tough questions. That Chance had overreacted and turned a reasonable interview into a confrontation. Others sided with Chance, arguing that Colbert had been condescending from the start, that his questions were loaded with assumptions, that his response to being challenged revealed his true colors. The debate raged online and in living rooms and at dinner tables across the country. Was Colbert wrong to ask about privilege? Was Chance wrong to push back so hard? Should Colbert have apologized more genuinely? Should Chance have walked away sooner or stayed to finish the conversation? Who made it personal first? Who crossed the line? Was there even a line, or was this just two passionate people talking past each other? The footage became one of those cultural moments that people would reference for years. Clips were analyzed frame by frame. Body language experts weighed in. Media critics wrote dissertations. Everyone had a theory about what had really happened, what it meant, what it revealed about society. But at the center of all the noise and debate and hot takes was a simple truth that got lost in the chaos. Two people had sat down to have a conversation, and instead of finding common ground, they'd found a chasm. Instead of building understanding, they'd built walls. And in the end, nobody had one. Not Colbert, not Chance, not the audience that had to watch it all unfold. The interview became a case study in how quickly things can go wrong, how easily miscommunication can turn into conflict, how difficult it is to have honest conversations about race and privilege and power when everyone involved brings their own baggage and blind spots and defenses to the table. So, what do you think? Was Colbert out of line with his questions, or was Chance too sensitive? Should the host have handled it differently, or did the guest escalate unnecessarily? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and make sure you hit that subscribe button because we'll be breaking down more controversial moments like this one. The real question is, could this conversation have gone differently, or was this clash inevitable from the start?